15 past the hour, new developments this morning in Donald Trump's hush money trial. What a morning it has been so far. The judge has imposed another fine against Trump for violating the gag order. Judge Huang Merchan also had this warning for Trump that if he continues to violate the gag order, quote, as much as I do not want to propose a jail sanction, I will if necessary. Back with us live from outside New York City Courthouse, NBC News correspondent Yasmin Vossoughian, and also back with us, Michael Zeldin and Dave Ehrenberg. So, Yasmin, talk to us about this whole Trump order violation thing that the judge dealt with early this morning. And then there was a direct kind of statement from the judge to the former president about what he may be forced to do.
Yeah, it was a real, I think, dramatic moment in the first 30 minutes of the day, Jose, which might be setting up what we're going to be expecting for the remainder of the trial. And that was his decision on this gag order. It was yet another violation of the gag order. So the former president having to pay another $1,000 now, topping off at $10,000. He'll have had to pay out in violations of these gag orders. This violation was pertaining to a comment that was made about the jury when the former president had mentioned publicly that he thought the jury was made up of 95% of Democrats. The other two he did not find the former president in violation of, pertaining to comments made by Michael Cohen, about Michael Cohen, I should say, and a comment made about David Pecker as well. Let me read for you specifically, Jose, if I can, what the judge said about the possibility of jail time for the former president if he continues to violate this gag order. And he went on to say this, Jose, the last thing I want to do is to put you in jail. You are the former president of the United States and possibly the next president as well. There are many reasons why incarceration is truly a last resort for you. But then, Jose, he goes on to say, but I have a job to do, and I will do that job and essentially choose to incarcerate you if you keep and continue to violate this gag order. He mentions, obviously, some of the difficulties in incarcerating a former president of the United States who is now running for re-election. Secret Service being one of those complications. If, in fact, he was put in jail, they'd have to deal with Secret Service as well. So certainly that he is taking that into understanding. But it seems as if Judge Juan Merchan will not hesitate if the former president continues to violate that gag order. It does, though, Jose, seem as if the former president is getting the message along with his legal team. And I think back to last week when his legal team at one point, I believe it was Susan Necheles, who came forward and said the former president would like to repost some comments made by some legal analysts. We want to ask the judge for permission if, in fact, we can repost this. The judge says, I'm not in the order, or it's not my job, really, to give you permission as to whether or not you can post something or not. If you are skeptical about it, if you have reservations about it, my advice to you is don't do it, right? So we're going to have to wait and see if the former president continues to violate this gag order, if he's getting the message now as to the fact that Judge Juan Merchan is certainly ready, willing, able, and prepared to put him in jail if he does that.
So, Michael, what's your reaction to the judge's ruling? We are in such unusual times.
We are, but I thought what the judge did was smart, which was to say, you can go after Cohen, you can go after Pecker. These are, sort of adults in the room, and they're expecting this sort of attack, and they've been attacked by you for a long time. So essentially, it's not desirable, but not contemptuous. But the jury is another matter. And that is where the additional $1,000 fine came from. And so I think he's doing a good job in sort of parsing to make sure that Trump has his free speech rights to the maximum extent possible, but that he's cordoned off that area which is off limits. And to the extent that Trump keeps, touching on those areas, he's going to keep getting fined. I'm doubtful he'll go to jail, but, the courtrooms that I've practiced in always have a lockup behind the courtroom where judges hold witnesses who are coming from jails pending their arrival in the courtroom itself. Maybe an hour in one of those cells might be all that Donald Trump gets or needs to understand the seriousness of continuous violations of gag orders imposed on by a very serious judge.
It's just so wild. This whole thing is so wild. But Dave, so what are the options and how, is it feasible?
It is, and I agree with Michael on this. The judge is telegraphing this because he may have to push the nuclear button, which is to put Trump in jail. I don't think he is going to wear an orange jumpsuit and go to jail. But I think if Trump continues down this road, he will put him in timeout. That's really what this is. Yeah, he'll put him in a room and say, you stay there for an hour. But to think of him wearing steel bracelets or picking up trash on the highway before trial, no, that's not.
So what are the facilities that exist? And Michael just kind of explained like what they are in general. What are some of the facilities, for example, in counties throughout the country?
Well, a lot of courthouses have these little rooms in there, and it's for people who need that time out. It's for contempt, and I think that could happen here eventually. But the judge knows that it's a fraught move if he's going to put the former president in jail, incarceration, and maybe that's what Trump wants, to show grievance to his supporters because that's what they thrive on. So he's telegraphing it. He's saying, look, you're forcing my hand. Please don't force my hand. And eventually, if he does, yeah, maybe he sits in a room for an hour.